Okay, looks like it's going live. Hello, everyone. I can see us live and up and running. I am here with Yvette Hyter, who is my guest today on DEI Speech IQ. So thank you so much for saying yes. I truly appreciate it. Frankly, I also know that I've been trying to get you on for like 6 months. So you're a busy, busy woman, busy woman. So cheers to you. Thank you for saying yes to me and
Thank
coming on
you.
and chatting with me today. I got my iced tea in there because I need a little coolness in there. I usually have tea in there. How are you today, Yvette?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So we should be live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on supposedly I might be at live if it worked out correctly on Instagram, but I have very limited understanding of social media. So
Oh, but you have a lot more than I do.
I'm trying my best to get the word out. So let's just say get the word out. And I think that this is, going to be a good one for us. I got to stop sharing this screen. I forgot. So let me stop sharing that screen. Get that out of the way. So thank you. Like I said, cheers to you again, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
I'm
for
very
having
thirsty,
me.
apparently. So I just learned, and that you actually play instruments. So that's pretty cool. I mean,
I
that's
do.
how often do you get to play, by the way?
Well,
Yeah, I know this is an off-topic
I
question.
know it's quite okay. I am preparing I was preparing a violin recital for last year, but my schedule was too busy to pull it off. And so, I mean, not a recital, a concert of just me playing.
Wow.
And so I'm hoping to do it this year, probably in the fall. And so, but I play where I take lessons, I play every week, with my teacher. And I started off on piano at 7 years of age,
Right.
and we each could choose two instruments. So everybody had to play the piano if we wanted to play one instrument, but then had a choice of a second instrument.
Oh,
And I wanted to play the violin because in Detroit, I grew up in Detroit. The Detroit school system took you to orchestras, like the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, to the art museums. It was a very art forward educational system for all children.
yeah.
And I fell in love with the violin,
Nice.
and I'm still in love with it to
So
this day.
I didn't have those choices. I had the recorder and and the guitar. And as I just said, I have a guitar that I don't know how to play. But one day I'm gonna
You
focus
will.
my, attention and finally learn how to play it properly. So
Yeah.
I have a couple I have a
It just gives you so much, joy. It's a way of, it helps me stay centered and remember where I'm from. And it's just good. Music
yeah,
is so
agreed.
important. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Music is, I mean, it gives you a good feeling. So obviously, that's why, I think that, art programs and creative programs are so important. And so, that's definitely one of those things that, when schools don't have them, it
I
makes it,
know.
yeah, it makes it very,
Yeah.
it's not the same experience. You got to have some of that outlets in some ways. And it
Yeah.
teaches you discipline, which is the other thing. Like there's a lot of those things. But hey, listen, I'm old, so I get it. I get it. The new thing today is like being able to rhyme. I guess I want to learn how to rap and rhyme too. So I over the years. So I'm not that old, so I figured it out.
I was gonna say you're not old because if you're old, that means I'm old.
But,
And
we all are trying to do something creative, I guess. But for those who don't know you yet, tell them a little bit about how you got to be a speech pathologist. In other words, what areas of speech pathologist have you worked in, and kind of how did you come to your journey here?
well, actually, I just told this story to a class the other day. But I was always interested in words as a child and crossword puzzles. And my father got me into doing crossword puzzles, and I did word games. I used to pretend like I was speaking other languages. And we had a career day. This was in middle school, fifth grade. We had a career day, and the librarian asked me what I liked, what I was interested in. I told her all about the word puzzles and different languages. And she directed me to speech pathology, as it was called at that time. This was in the 70s. And I fell in love with what I read on the paper. But my parents, being who they were, they got me an opportunity to be a candy striper, which is a volunteer position in a hospital working in the rehab center. And my job was to read to a child who was in a coma. And when he came out of the coma, the only voice he recognized was my voice. And that did it for me. I was like, okay, this is what I have to do with the rest of my life. It was a struggle because I struggled between that and being a professional musician, right? So I had
Hmm.
but I went to college, worked as an itinerant speech language clinician in Florida. I love that job. I worked in schools mostly, and I had an opportunity to work in a transdisciplinary preschool, and then in a residential school. I became a diagnostician, which was somebody who focused on assessment, not on intervention. Um, and then I thought I was missing something and moved back to Detroit and worked in the hospital, and which was not a very good time because I had a lot of that's when I was things were becoming really clear to me that the children of color were being diagnosed inappropriately. And I was speaking out about it. Took a lot of guts for me to do that, but I was still doing it. And it just fell on deaf ears. And
Hmm.
uh, people were saying that, I didn't know what I was talking about. I was an inept clinician because, and in some ways, I didn't have the argument. I knew that what we were doing was not right, and I knew the results weren't correct, but I didn't have the facility of literature in my head to be able to argue my point.
Yeah.
And I was deciding I'm going to quit. I'm going to end this. I'm going to not be a speech language clinician anymore. I went to what was supposed to be my last ASHA conference, and I went to an MC Square presentation, and there was Dr. Dunn. I've never seen him before or after. He was like an angel who was encouraging students of color to get their doctorates to change the course of speech language pathology and audiology. And it felt like he was saying, You have to go back and get your I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. You had to go back and get your go get your doctorate. And it felt like he was saying, Yvette, you have to do this. And so I spent the rest of that conference um, talking to everybody who had PhD behind their name, just to get a sense of like, could I do this and should I do this? And that's when I decided that I wasn't going to quit speech language pathology. I was going to change it.
All right.
I was
Wow.
going to contribute to it.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I have tried or thought about, let's just say it this way. I've thought about, and I'm gonna leave it there, doing the doctorate. I'm not sure if I'm too old. Once again, back to me being old. Um,
You're
but
not. You're not.
but also, yeah, it's definitely one of those things where if you want to make changes, you have to be at the table. So I get that. I definitely get that. So good for you. I've heard the name Dr. Dunn before, so it's not somebody that I'm super like I didn't get the opportunity, right, to meet. But on the other hand, that's okay. I know the reputation, so that's great. That's amazing. So you said that you were a diagnostician, so you did mostly
Hmm.
assessments at first, and now you of course you went into academia.
Right. I
Um,
went into
yeah,
academia and
yeah,
have focused on culturally responsive practices as well as trauma-informed practices. And the third leg of that is globally sustainable practices. So
gotcha.
I've in my university life has been not only teaching, but clinical supervision,
Sure.
and then also, writing and publishing and
Yes.
creating knowledge to kind of help move the discipline along.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that this is definitely some that's where I met you really in academia.
Hmm.
So you came to do a presentation and then shone the light on what needed to be done, what needed to be moved forward in cultural responsiveness. And again, I think I know that over time you've changed and expanded, I will say, what you've been talking about,
Hmm.
because that that's what we do if we're smart and you are smart,
Thank
that
you.
we add to what we know, and we sometimes have to unlearn and relearn, of course, which is also part of it. But I
Hmm.
would say that you were the first person probably that I directly heard talk about cultural responsiveness and not
Mm.
and using that term in particular,
Hmm.
and not multiculturalism.
Uh-huh.
And that was, for me, like, yeah, what does that, where are we going? What does that look like? And what does that mean? And then honestly, now, I give you credit for this trauma informed practices also, because I'm sure, I feel like probably people are the same way out there, the audience is, kind of feeling the same way, is that we've talked about it. We know what's happening, rather. We know
Hmm.
what's happening, but we don't have the words, kind of what you said earlier, to be able
Right.
to talk about it, and these issues better, just better, and more clearly, succinctly, frankly, which is always, what we're trying to, teach our students if we're, in academia.
Yeah.
And then, so I feel you are now, of course, no surprises here, um, the expert in trauma informed practice, and that is also something, even as you just said, excuse me, I think you said globally sustainable. Like you coined so many phrases. Maybe,
Oh.
maybe I'm slow, and I know that you're going to say somebody else said it first, and somebody else did it first, and you are going to, I know you know this, but my point is, in my head, you're the source of this information.
Okay.
Sorry, students. I know that's not the right thing to say, but the point is, like, I'm like, yes, like we need words. We need like a nice way to say what we want to say, namely globally sustainable speech pathology. Like we need to talk about it globally. We are no longer talking about our, individual, I would say, and I live in New York, like areas, states.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
not even talking about our own country just by
Mm-mm.
itself, so to speak, and the
Because the
impact that we
country
have.
the country is not in a vacuum, right?
Yep.
We are connected to other countries. There's a big movement of speech language clinicians and audiologists traveling to other countries to
Yep.
provide services, to learn. And we have to understand, how to practice in ways that are sustainable. And you're right. I do have to say this. I know that, I did not coin coin those terms. The Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Agency
Yes.
um, probably was one of the earlier
Yes.
groups that talked about trauma informed, or Bessel van der Kolk. I'm absolutely sure it was not me. And with regard to global sustainability, I don't know. There's been some discussion, at least since 2007, and probably before that, but 2007 is when SIG 17
Yes.
came on the scene, maybe 2006, 2007. There's been some discussion about global practice, and then fast forward a few years, there was the discussion that we needed to practice in ways that were sustainable. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
and interestingly, I think there's a larger contingent of people who are focused on global issues than there are in speech language focusing on trauma.
Right.
Because
Right.
global has had more, I think it's had more backing from the American Speech Language Hearing Association, from ASHA, there's 617. Who knows how long it was being discussed before
Mhm.
that time.
Sure. Sure.
And with even though I've been working in the area of trauma for since the 80s, and then writing about it and talking about it every chance I get since early, since 2000, if not earlier, then it's very slow to move.
Yeah.
But this year, ASHA has a topic committee,
Correct. Exactly.
counseling, trauma
That's
informed,
right.
and
And you are
contextualized
it.
practice. And I'm the co-chair with Dr.
Exactly.
JJ Wicker.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And but it's exciting because it's now more of a public platform. There's a more organized way of getting people to think about it. And I can say this without letting anything out of the bag, that we have lots of proposals to
Good.
review. So there's going to be more presentations
Right.
um,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same about telepractice, and it's similar. I tell the students when they're looking at the SIGs, like look at the numbers of the SIGs,
Hmm.
because SIG 18 is telepractice, and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
co-chair for the telepractice one, as you know. But
Hmm.
the point is, it's like that's when things become important, right? Like when there's a special interest group, then suddenly it's like it's got a new additional kind of life and level of
Right.
importance within the
Yeah.
field, and that's the reason why I'm saying like that you're bringing it to us, because the truth is those things can be talked about, and I follow definitely other clinicians in other areas, especially around mental health, of course, social
Hmm.
work, etc. But so what you're talking about, and of course just international studies. I was linguistics major, so I just like languages. I like to look at the world,
Hmm. Hmm.
more, uh, just as a speech pathologist, but it's putting it into the context of speech pathology, which is what you do. Like it may be talked about, but it's not talked about with speech pathologists. We're
Hmm.
talking about, kind of, I want to say the basics, right? So, the CASA-9, let's go there. The
Yeah.
CASA-9 areas, which are, voice fluency, AAC, which
Right.
wasn't there when I was even in school,
Uh-huh.
swallowing, but then the general ones like expressive and receptive language, etc.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like those are the basics that students learn, and that we think are. And if we ask our friends, like, what is speech pathology? Stuttering, disfluency,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like lisping,
Yeah.
articulation and
Yeah.
phonology, things like that. But it's like we know that there's more to what we do.
Hmm.
And it takes somebody like you in some ways to write the book on it, but also to write the articles, and but also to bring it to the table in a way that we can, for those of us that are not hyper focused on those areas, can
Hmm.
kind of digest, frankly. and get to kind of like the root of them, because I think it's forward thinking. And that's what that's the way that I view it. I view that you are forward thinking in what you're doing, what you've been doing,
Mhm.
and that you're bringing a lot of things that are not basic. To the table. You are doing you're adding the icing and the sprinkles on the cake. The cake is the basics of speech language pathology. You work in a school, you work in a hospital, you work at a clinic. Fine, fine, fine. All those things are good. But then what's beyond that, and what's the layers of that even, when you're doing things? And truthfully, of course, with our kind of new, I would say post COVID in particular,
Mm-hmm.
uh, life, for students, for us as faculty, for our clients, like just the idea and the knowledge that we need to be able to continue to support our clients in the best way possible for their success, for their outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not doing that, then what else are we doing? What are we
Right,
doing anything
exactly.
for? Like, we're not doing it to hear our own voices.
Right, exactly.
So we have to
Exactly.
be able to, kind of move forward. And then, like you said, just globally, people in South Africa, people in Australia, people in like so many, Ghana, are working on speech language pathology, of course, in
Mm-hmm.
England.
And
And
in different ways, right? And they shouldn't be like little mini American speech language groups, right? It
right,
should be very unique to their particular setting.
right.
And people are starting to produce, and they're not even necessarily have the same credentialing
Yep.
because, the context maybe doesn't call for it at this point. It's more
Yeah.
community based in some places,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Good point.
individually, based on an individual one on one. And so it's just, it needs to be different. And if we are engaged in traveling and working, then we need to understand, what our presence does.
Yep.
And we shouldn't be replacing people who are there who can do it, or even bringing supplies that you can create or get while you're there. There's just a lot. I could talk about any of those topics all day, and I know we don't have all day, but
Yeah, no, you're actually so on point. I just last month in March, I was in Dominican Republic. This is only the second time I've done any sort of international mission with the students in particular.
hmm
And I don't even like to call it a mission, because I feel that that has connotations that I do
hmm
not personally buy into. I'll say it that way. Just historically, mission trips are things that I'm not necessarily involved in. Um,
right.
but our interactions, one of the reasons why DR was good for us in particular was that there was a student that came from DR, and that we were able to connect with an audiologist and a speech therapist who were in DR. Like, we are Dominican Republic, excuse me, I know I'm not
Yes.
saying the full words. But that to me is important. It's an important part of what you're talking about when you're going there. I know that Smiles for Speech is doing something. Keisha Lindsay Nurse is planning. She does
hmm
lots of things.
Yeah.
There's somebody else that's coming to my mind, but I can't remember the name right now. Oh, I'm sorry. But yeah, they're doing those trips. And of course, Murad Dunn Murad, who
hmm
I love, love, love. That's my girl. And she does it for audiology in particular.
hmm
So they've been doing it for a while, and then adding more people to it. So she brought, another a speech pathologist with her on a trip, or on that type of learning experience for the
hmm
students, and then also supplemental in some way speech pathology, because it's not really, it's kind of, it's if we're going there for a week, we're not going there for long enough. It's
Exactly.
it's,
Exactly.
it's not
Yeah.
enough. So taking Miriam with her, and doing those kinds of things. So I agree. There's so much more that we can do and learn and know about with other countries. I know there's a lot of other research that's coming from other places too, and
Yeah.
and it's growing. And as you said, it needs to be done differently. Depending on where they are, just
hmm
because historically they don't have the same versions that we have. They don't have the same ways that they need to. Yes, the world is getting smaller, but thanks to the internet. Thanks to the internet, it is getting smaller. But as you said, it doesn't have to be the model, the mini Asha, for example.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
I agree with that. Has your since you started in the field, I'm going back to the questions. My apologies. I know
Oh,
we're
that's
like
okay. That's okay.
topics. Go back to one of the questions at least. Since you started in the field, has your perspective changed in diversity, equity, and inclusion or DEI? I know mine has, but in what ways, whether it's positive or negative? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to say whether it's positive or negative. I think this is kind of a mix of both,
Mhm.
that yes, I think that we spend entirely too much time talking about worried about diversity. That has been the one of the main pushes of our discipline is focused on diversity. And taking this from my husband, he says, well, if you have a bag and you have all apples, right, that's not diversity. But if you have a bag, you have an apple, an orange, and a banana, that's diversity. But guess what? You still have the bag, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that we focus way too much on diversity of all the different kinds of fruits in a bag and not enough on changing or tearing away, ripping away the bag. And in my estimation, culturally responsive practices is tearing the bag and building structures that are more equitable and more just. And that's where I think we should be focused our energy. Um, Let me tell you, in 2000, which 2001, I think, is when ASHA started collecting data on racial ethnic background of clinicians. And there was 5% of people of color or racialized groups. And at that time, 2000, 2001, 2021 or 22, there's 8.7%. Okay, not a big change, right? And there are lots of barriers for people coming into the discipline. It's the same questions get asked all the time. Wonder why? Why can't we? Excuse me. Sorry, I kind of regressed there, but forgot I was being taped.
No, you're preaching to the choir, frankly, right now. So yes.
But we focus so much on the facade as opposed to making the real change, which is we need to look at what's equitable. There are inequities in our admissions policies, there are inequities in injustices in the way in using this may not be popular, what I'm about to say, but thinking about those essential functions or core functions, there are inequities built into that. There are inequities in the way the curriculum is laid out and what classes are highlighted and the way, so if you think about it, there's so much, the bag hasn't changed at all.
Right.
And that's what really needs to be changed. And for me, that's I've moved in terms of thinking cultural responsiveness is not just, making your practice um uh accept consistent with beliefs and values and worldviews of a wide range of people, but you also have to deal with policies, you have to deal with curriculum, you have to deal with clinical placements, clinical supervision, you have to deal with pedagogy,
Yeah.
and essentially the needle hasn't, in my estimation, and I've been working since I was in 1984, however many years, is that 40 years? Wow.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's 40 years
Yes.
that essentially that hasn't changed from what I've seen. Because when I was a student, when I was a faculty member, as a retiree, from a very different vantage point, but some of the issues that I dealt with as a student, I still hear students talking about it
Right.
today. As a faculty member, um, I did not always have a very pleasant time or a group of people that were supportive That doesn't discount the people I had that were very supportive. But it wasn't always pleasant, you know? So I hear the same thing today about students, I mean, new faculty members
Right.
and people who are clinicians. And, so it's like the essence hasn't changed,
Yeah.
and we need to move past that.
True.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy. I remember you spoke to the New York State NISHLA
Uh,
organization
mhm.
in January of 2 years ago. And I remember you said something about transformative change, and I think that's the reason why I ended up like kind of like really just like honing in on that. I wrote it down. I was like, yeah, it's like you don't need to just. And again, as you were talking about this, thinking about like, oh, you're putting in the student body and you're making differences in the student body, and you're saying that the student body is different, and you're seeing different, cultures in the student body and whatever else. And then I'm like, but what about in the front of the classroom? Like, are you making changes there? Because then, you're still controlling the narrative in many ways, right?
Right. Yeah.
So those are some of the things. And again, there's a myriad of things that people are, like you said, going to say for why and how this is not moving as quickly as it could or should or needs to, frankly. But you're correct. I mean, I definitely understand um, where you get some support from certain people for sure, and they're always in your corner. They're always being, good mentors and sponsors and, supporting as allies and things like that. And then it's also like you're banging your head against the wall if you're trying to make those kinds of changes where it's like
Yeah.
it's not really changing. So I remember you saying that actually when you first spoke to us back in 2019 again. Yeah, definitely continues to be the
A
narrative, so to
challenge.
speak, as
Yeah.
you said. And yet, as best as we can, we've got to make sure that I would say, keep sitting at the table, keep coming to the discussions. Hopefully we won't be discounted when we're there. Except the truth is that it's a long haul. I know Vicki Deal Williams said the same thing. She's been doing this for a while, for a minute, and she's like, there's lots of work to do. There's lots of work that's been done, but of course, you almost can't take your foot off the pedal.
No,
So
you can't ever take your foot off. It's a long game, right? So it's
yeah,
just something that you have to buckle down and do. My father used to tell me, because I would get so frustrated. This is when I was younger, but um, he would say, "You're a spoke in the wheel." And what I understood from that is that you know how the spokes hold the wheel, strengthen the wheel.
sure.
And it has a bike wheel has lots of spokes. Well, I'm one spoke, right? I'm going to do my part, but it takes all those spokes
Yep.
to do the work of upholding what's right and making the change.
Right.
And we just need more people who are moving in that direction. We're all on a continuum, and hopefully we're moving in the same direction. Some out front, some like in the middle, some, bringing up the rear. But it only becomes a problem when you have people who decided, I'm not going to make it move. I'm not moving along. I'm not moving. I
Right.
like it right here. I'm very
Right.
comfortable. Otherwise,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I recognize that in my because, I think everybody knows that I did officially retire in 2020, although I'm still very active.
Right.
But in my lifetime, my uh, ability and need to work as intensely as I always have is coming to a close.
No,
No,
don't say that.
well, you other people got to come on up now. But it's I just you can only do it for so long. It's been 40 years. My gosh, I need to slow down.
Yeah.
But the it's important to keep that momentum going. So I
Right.
recognize that maybe in my generation, in my time frame, I won't see some of the changes, the transformations that I think need to happen. But I really hope I do, I was did a I met with students of LIU, and that really gave me some hope. The questions and comments that they made, that, okay, this is a generation who is really concerned not so much about diversity, but about justice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
justice will cover diversity,
Yes.
right? But it's
Yes.
time to try to move that needle. So
True.
there is hope, I think, in the generations behind me.
Well, that better be. That better be. I mean, I also definitely think that, if we're talking to students and young people and bringing them on and building legacies around kind of mentorship, things like that, just meaning you're talking to people that are in the next generation that are coming up, that are getting into the field, that idea that we are putting some of our hope in their successes, obviously, and that they are, hopefully being, similarly, or I would say kind of like compatibly and collaboratively influenced towards the same goals that we like, that we want to
Hmm.
see, that is something that hopefully we get to see as we go along. And yes, sometimes it's obviously and unfortunately a thankless effort. I will say sometimes I'm like, is this worth it? But I, uh, in my, and probably the reason why you keep on getting up and doing it and trying something new. And frankly, you over the years, just looking at your history through your, academic, work, over the years, just, kind of picking up again and doing something new, trying to make sure that your next steps keep on moving you forward. I think that what I think for myself is, can I sleep at night, right? Like, can
Right,
I feel good
exactly.
about what I'm doing? I know that, just being an introvert, I talk to myself a lot. And so I have, those ongoing conversations about, was it good enough? And, was it right? And things like that. But I have enough of those conversations that I honestly don't need other people outside of me to tell me those same things. Like at a certain point, you're like, you know what? I'm good. Like my head has already got those messages. And yet that's the reason why I feel like, although I never thought I would even do this, like this podcast or,
Hmm.
vidcast, or, interview people that are kind of in the field, because I was like, who's going to listen to me, really? But the truth is, I was like, you know what? Maybe they won't listen to me, but they'll listen to the people that I talk to. Like that'll be fine.
And they'll
So,
listen to you too.
so and that was good enough for me. Like that's where, kind of where we have to, I want to say judge ourselves, but also, kind of be in the game for those reasons also, because again, you sleep with yourself, right? Like
Right,
whatever
exactly.
it
You
is, it's
have to
like,
live with yourself.
yeah, and if I can make a difference in the field, then that's great too. So I think that making a difference, of course, as we well, there was a phrasing, I want to say back in the 80s, like probably before that, of course, act act locally, think globally, right? Like, so
Globally,
that
right.
idea of like, if I do something like within this framework, then it could get to more people, and that people can actually kind of like think about it by viewing what we're doing locally. So I think that that's been, something that I since college have thought that way, so
Hmm.
that I can continue to, just try to do what I can do where I am, wherever that may
Hmm.
be. So I think that you, on the other hand, of course, reach so many more people. Um, I, I, our time is running out, so I do not want to keep you. You probably have another meeting. But I guess I should ask you, what projects are you working on and how can people reach out to you? And then I'll ask the final question, I guess, about
Okay,
us.
yeah. So people can reach me by my email, hyterphd at languageliteracypractices.com. And I'm on email all the time, so I hope people do reach out to me. In terms of the projects I'm working on, well, Marlene and I are working on a third edition of our textbook. And there are some additional topics that we're adding, like
Mm,
uh, racial linguistics, crip linguistics, translanguaging, Caribbean English,
wow.
disability justice. So, that's a little preview of some of the things that will
Wow.
be
Yes.
added to the book. I have a book coming out on trauma, language research and post-traumatic stress, which will be out in July through Rutledge. Very
Okay.
excited about that. And
Yeah.
then,
Congrats. That's big.
yeah, so that's an edited book. So it has 15 different authors in it. And I am continuing to work on um, my writing, my research. There are things that I feel like I really want to get completed before I completely just
Chill.
yeah, chill and practice just focus on my violin or whatever. And so one of those is publishing my assessment of pragmatic language and social communication. It's
Wow.
going to come out in Greek first because I was having trouble collecting data in the US, but my colleague Yanis Vogantrogas in Greece had um, several doc students who were working on collecting data. And so we're going to move forward with that. And then I think Gerald is going to help collect some data.
Excellent. Yes,
Yeah,
Gerald is out there,
I
and
know
on
he's doing
LinkedIn. So
it.
he's doing so much. He's doing stuff with, of course, the Asher Convention with us.
I
But
know.
he's cheering you on LinkedIn. So
Oh,
he's definitely, in the comments. So shout out to him for show.
hey, Gerald.
Exactly. So yes. So because and I think that this question is appropriate for us and for you. I was saying that it is, I forget what it is called officially, but it's Stress Reduction Month or International Mental Health Month or some version of that.
Is actually child abuse pr
Well, there's a
protection
few
of
different
children
months.
from,
Yes, there's a
yeah,
few different
child
months
abuse
that
month.
this counts under, including, autism, et cetera, et cetera. But in particular, um, so with what do you do? What's your favorite thing to do to reduce your own stress and, kind of chill? I know the violin. I know the
I
violin.
know the violin, but I'm going to show you
Oh, crocheting. Is that crocheting?
crocheting. Yep. I
Nice.
have been crocheting and knitting since I was a child. This is the first Afghan I ever made.
Okay.
I gave it to my grandmother. But after she passed, I was able to get it back.
Absolutely. I get that.
But that's what I do. I make big Afghans and I usually give them away. But it really is helpful for bring me back to center.
Yeah. Yeah, clearing the mind. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I've forgotten about, I used to knit, so I really should pick that back up again. That's a great idea,
Yes, it's a
actually.
really stress reducer. You have a stressful day, or you're thinking about the next presentation and you can't quite get anything on paper. You pick up a crochet and some yarn, and then after a while, you're like, oh, okay, that's a good idea.
Yes, let the ideas flow in because again, sometimes our minds are so busy. So
Right.
I really appreciate you coming on to DEI Speech IQ. Thank you again. Cheers to you and all that you do
Thank you.
and to your successes, many successes, obviously. We will be looking out for that book in July, and I will, of course, continue to look out for you in our well, I would I would say the convention planning committee as we continue to move that forward. So thank
Thank
you
you.
again for
Thank you
saying
for
yes.
having me. Sure. This was fun.
I appreciate you and I look forward to seeing you again in real life. Right.
Yes.
Take care. Have a great
Okay.
day. And
Thank you.
thank you
You
to the
too.
audience for coming on. And for anybody that watches this later, feel free to comment and cheer us on. Thank you again, Gerald, for being out there. See,
Thanks, Gerald.
Yes. Take care. Bye bye.
Okay, bye-bye.